Hello, everyone, and welcome to our April IBA Stage event. For those less familiar with this series, IBA Stage is an online series in which invited biennials have a chance to deliver a presentation of their most recent project. The series was developed very much as a response of the impossibility of traveling during the height of the COVID pandemic, but given the response and the value that we saw in it, we decided to keep it as part of our public program, as we thought it would continue to be a great tool to create a lasting archive of biennials across the world for our members and those interested in the biennial culture in general. Let me warmly welcome our two guests today, Kwasi Ohene-Ayeh and Lassana Igo Diarra. Both have been working with the Rencontres de Bamako in various in different titles, with different titles. Kwasi Ohene-Ayeh is a curator, critic based in Kumasi in Ghana. He's a member of Black Star Line's Coalition and Exit Frame Collective. He was one of the artistic advisors for the 59th edition of the Venice Biennial under the artistic director of Cecilia Alemanni. And on the occasion of Documenta 15 in 2022 last year, he took part with Kelas Bareng, an invitation from the Lumbung collective, for the Lumbung system, in an event in Kassel. And Igo, who as IBA we know very well, and he's an esteemed member of our boards, is the founder of Galerie Medina in Bamako, which is operating since 2011. He has curated several exhibitions in Mali, in Africa in general, and internationally. Since 2019, he's directing, or he was the general delegate of the Rencontres de Bamako, and I'm sure he will tell us more about the history a bit of this biennial taking place in Bamako since 1994, I believe. His personal works were shown in Documenta 14, in both Kassel and Athens, and he's further on the initiator of the Bamako International Youth Literature Festival, Kan Lakadi, as well as the Summer University of Culture in Bamako, Bamako Symposium of Arts. And I think with this introduction, I would love to give you the floor, and we can't wait to hear more about the last, but about in general the Rencontres de Bamako in Bamako. Thank you very much.
I think I will just briefly introduce the Biennale before I give the floor to Kwasi. So what we should have to know that when we start the discussion with some people who we can consider who create this event, I can talk to the French photographer Françoise Huguet. Françoise Huguet is a very well-known photographer, and they were starting with photographer from Mali like Racine Keita, and of course Malik Sidibé and Seydou Keita. But one of the reasons that they chose Bamako as a capital of African photography, they say it's because of the light of Bamako. I'm very surprised about this story, but I like to say this story, the light of Bamako. So the sky and the light, this is one of the reasons as the photography, they think it could be a nice city. So I will invite all of the people who never come in Bamako to try to imagine the light and the sky to join us in this conversation. So briefly, for those who are not familiar in the region West Africa, what I want to, West Africa in the Francophone arena, there are 4 big biennale in this part of the Africa. One of the oldest is FESPACO, who is a cinema biennale, who is taking Burkina Faso in Ouagadougou. This is the oldest biennale of cinema who exists. So those who are in the same generation, I can talk to about the Massa. The Massa is a Marché des Arts et des Spectacles en Afrique. This is more music and entertainment and performance biennale in Abidjan, in Côte d'Ivoire. And the other one in Senegal is the Dakar, who is the biggest biennale of visual art in Senegal every 2 years. And finally, Bamako also is every 2 years the Biennale of Photography and Video. So that's the things in our region. So now to back in Bamako, what I want to briefly say, so it was starting in 1994. At that time, we have the president that called Alpha Oumar Konaré. He was very engaged himself also in arts. That's the reason and with those photographers, like I tell you, French and Malian tried to set up this event. So it was structured in the beginning as a production between Mali and France. So this was one of kind of complexity of this event, who is different, for example, from Burkina Faso, who was mainly supported by the state of Burkina Faso, or Dakar by the state. So in the beginning, it was mostly this association of French, and Mali tried step by step to become organization and to participate as a financial partner. So right now, we could say that Mali and France are in the same level of the participation in the financial resource. But the years that we come on take the control of the Biennale, I would say that there was several director general who was very well known before us. And it was, I can talk about, for example, one of the first director of the Biennale is Abdoulaye Konaté. Abdoulaye Konaté is a very well-known artist who exhibit worldwide now about Malian textile. He was the director of the Palais de la Culture, and he became also one of the first directors of this event. After him, it was Moussa Konaté, who was the director of the House of African Photography. And after this, it was Samuel Sidibé, who was also the director of the National Museum for a long time. He's quite well known also. And after it was myself, I just take the direction of the 12th anniversary. Who that edition, we're trying to, France was participate, but not the organization. All organization come to us. And the last one, the director was Sheikh Diallo, who is a great designer who became the director for the last one. So yeah, I would give, before I give the floor to Kwasi, it was also important there was a formal curator of this biennale who played a real important role. I want to say Simon Jami. Simon Jami, who was curated 3 editions of the Biennale. So he became one of the most curators known by the Bamako Rencontres. And after that, also BC Silva make a great curatorial exhibition in Bamako. And the 2 last year was Bonaventure. So Bonaventure was not available today because there is a big show in Madagascar today, those 2 days. That's the reason I think Kwasi is the perfect guy to be, because he was a curatorial team at the 12th edition. And the last one, he was part of the jury also. So he can say several things, and I will give him the floor. In case there is some edit, I'm still here to, yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Igo, Charlie. Let me share my screen and begin. So again, thanks to Igo, thanks to Christian and Jennifer for the invitation. I am I participated in organizing and planning the Rencontres in 2019, as well as Igo just said, being part of the jury for the last edition. In honor of Bisi Silva's memory, she has been a very influential person on the continent and beyond, and directly on my own professional life. And so she has also been one of the past curators who have notably impacted the biennial. So this is a tribute to her in loving memory of Bisi Silva. What I will do is go through the 12th and mainly the 12th edition, but I will highlight common strategies, common ideas that span between the 12th edition of the Rencontre, which I was co-curator, as well as the 13th, because they were both under the artistic direction of Bonaventure Soh Bejeng Ndikung, who was the driver of the bus, if you like. But also here to shout out my colleagues, Aziza Hamel, Astrid Lepoutier, whom I worked with as co-curators for the 12th edition themed Streams of Consciousness, Concatenation of Individuals. And also acknowledge the curatorial team for the 13th, in the presence of Tandazani Tlakama, Liz Ikiriko, Akimbode Akimbi, and Miriam Berada. Of course, there's a bigger team who are always on the ground, making things happen. Here you have Sheikh Jallo, Igo himself, Marie Dusu Sangare, who has been, really, really a pivot for me and others in this exhibition, as well as Penda, who has also been a light in planning. So a few facts and historical notes before we delve into the curatorial perspectives that I will discuss. As Igo informed us earlier, the Rencontre was founded in Bamako in Mali in '94. It's the Pan-African Biennale. It is the leading and main international events dedicated to lens-based practices in the African world. The 12th edition was its 25th anniversary edition as well, so it was special in that regard. But it brings over 50,000 visitors to Bamako every couple of years. More than 100 artists, close to 200 artists are shown and invited to participate during the professional week and beyond. It also sees hundreds of professionals coming from all over the world, gallerists, broadcasters, agents, journalists, curators, and so forth. And it is the biennial that it also has a legacy of giving or offering prizes to artists who participate, to kind of recognize strong positions and so forth. Some of the prizes are named after prominent persons, Seydou Keita, recently Bisi Silva, Okoye-Nwezo Prize has also been installed in the 25th anniversary edition. It involves, huge public programs, talks, performances, workshops, and so forth. There are also educational and youth programs that the biennial actively engages in to kind of disseminate the ideas that are being generated in the show. So for me, the crux of what Bonaventure Ndikung his vision was for the past two editions was or can be summarized in a question, which I phrase as, how can we at one and the same time affirm the flatness of photography while exploring what lies within and beyond it? So for me, it is this framework that allowed us to kind of, play with the form, play with the possibilities and the potentials of what a photograph or what photography can become. Because it's historically, it began as a biennial of photography. We wanted to start with first principles, and so what is photography in itself? So that, especially as we've gone through the past decades with the advancements of various technologies and so forth, how do we kind of, continue to complicate the practice and the understanding of photography from its conventional practice. So the 12th edition, which was themed Themes of Consciousness, had a subtitle which reads as A Concatenation of Individuals. It was largely about taking the medium and translating it, exploring it in terms of continuities, flows, fluxes. In fact, the title was taken from the literary concept, which but it's also the title of a jazz album released by Abdullah Ibrahim and Max Roach in the mid to late 20th century, which for us determines a certain attitude to form. Jazz is more it's highly experimental, and so with that vibe, with that energy, how do you use it as a metaphor for coming to terms with something that is known? And it was also dealing with the practice of photography, not from the singular perspective of practitioners, but also seeing how it has been collectivized, how collectives are using the medium, manipulating it, to what ends are they stretching it out and so forth. And then it was also about coming to terms with Africanness, because it's a Pan-African biennial. We're not isolating our conception of Africanness to the geographical region, but looking at it in a universal sense. And so it's that's why we call it the African world. And then 2 years later, or a few years later, in the 13th edition, we have the curatorial team, based on my understanding, is able to further complicate these ideas that were inaugurated in the 12th edition by analyzing or examining the practice and the medium of photography in terms of multiplicity, difference, becoming, and heritage. The title of the biennial, which I will translate into English, it's Bambara phrase, which translates into English as the persons of the person are multiple in the person. Even though, and this was posited by the ethnologist and historian Amadou Hambateba, to deal with a kind of humanist approach to coming to terms with one's identity or one's self, if you like. And so by taking this as the base and also using it as as a means to think about the medium of photography, it was kind of expanded from its humanist framework into also considering these technological apparatuses and other forms. So when in the context of multiplicity, it was looked at, if we go back to Barr's phrase, the persons of the person are multiple in the person, which is talking about multiplicity in singularity. So, that gives us a very fertile kind of conceptual framework, through which to extrapolate and to be playful and experimental. And when we're talking about difference, usually it is also it is talked about in terms of objectively, distinguishing between two or more entities or things. But in this case, we can also think about self-difference. So if we are thinking about photography, we can think about photography as not a total or a complete idea or practice or medium, but as a fragmented, as having the inherent potential to become more than what is already known or what has become established. And then becoming, of course, kind of deals with this a lot more in the context of experimentation, in the context of being and form. So it is not, if a thing is flat, if we approach photography from the traditional angle of it being flat, single, autonomous, we think that it would be reducing too much. And so, that's why, for me, the question about affirming, yes, the flatness, but it can always be more than that. So these are the things that, a few of the ideas that there are more that animate the exhibitions as we set them. And I can speak particularly to the 12th edition because in that time, we were also exploring or demarcating a focus on photography collectives, women photographers, as well as women collectives from all over the African world. The streams of consciousness was, for us, the Niger River, which flows through Bamako, was the physical embodiment of this idea, these flows. And Africa as a planetary concept, not limited to the geographic area. And so we featured artists who were of African origin, but spread out and based in all in other parts of the globe. We were paying attention to the structure, the form and the potential of photography. Bonaventure was explicit in asking a question: what can photography do? This is a more functional question, as opposed to what the conventional iconographic understanding of what photography is, which asks, what does this image or what does this photograph mean? And so there was, for us, a shift from what the thing means, which could take you into so many arenas, valid arenas, but also we wanted to insert it into new situations, new conditions, to see what it can do in terms of activating new possibilities. So we're exploring photography in terms of text, in terms of sound, in terms of performance, and so on and so forth, which I will show you later in the presentation. So we also moved the exhibition from the expected locations, being the museums and so on, into family homes. So we were, it was literally moving the experience of the show into the private spaces of families who were open enough to allow us to turn or transform their private spaces into public exhibition grounds. So all of these will be evident. And it was also the first time, the 12th edition was amongst the first instances when you had like a large curatorial team and advisory team working on the biennial. So for the 12th edition, we featured 58 artists, 9 collectives, among whom are Mfon, the Autolit Group, AFPM, which is a collective of women photographers. We had 8 Solid Rocks. These are practitioners whom we think have had generational impact in terms of their how they have approached the medium, not just for themselves, but the influence that they have had in general on younger generations. Then we had 8 special projects which became like exhibitions within exhibitions, you know. So they were kind of some of them were fully realized curatorial projects, like John Fleetwood's tribute to David Goldblatt, and so forth. So the exhibition was told in 4 chapters. This is the 12th edition. It was told in 4 chapters, inspired by a novel or play by Ghanaian author Amatedu. So the first chapter was based on the presence of the invisible, the remote, and other ghostly matters. The second chapter was based on poetics and politics of ecosystems. The third was about, was exploring displacement, errantry, and diasporas. And the fourth was focusing on the possibility of hope in the future as practice. The publications that have emerged out of these 2 editions are also crucial to note. In the 12th edition, there were readers in both English and French. Was a newspaper and the catalog. For the 13th edition, you have this is the catalog that was worked on by Archive Books, who have been important collaborators since the 12th edition. So for the 12th edition, the sites were 11. Palais de la Couture, the Musée National, Lycée de Jeunes Filles, which is an all-girls high school. There was a Cinema El Hilal, where the film program was also staged, and then public spaces like roundabouts, overpasses, billboards, and so forth. So the show really extended into the fabric and the texture of the city. The train station and the House of African Photography, which are the 2 sites below, were used for the 13th edition. But in the 12th edition, the map wasn't ready by the time we were considering exhibition sites. So these are like 2 new locations that the 13th edition explored. So here let me just take you, this is just like a clip that runs through all of the sites and all of the, well, not all of them, but most of the impressions for the 12th edition, just to give you a sense of how the audiences, both international and local, were integrated into the show and how things came alive in all of these different spaces. So, and you also see the diversity of media that are being displayed here, from cyanotype prints to video works to performative projects, to so many different mediums coming together in the context of a photography or a lens, a biennial dedicated to lens-based practices. So for us, this is where the kind of intrinsic, multiplicity can also be explored. So the thing in itself, especially in the context of art, can be more than it seems. So how do you deal with this? How do you stretch it? How do you enable ideas that test these horizons? And that for me is where the force of the past two editions have been. In fact, the past few editions have been asking these questions as well. So for me, it was an opportunity to contribute to this recent legacy of the Rencontres, and yeah. So yeah, for me, this is the heart of the matter. This is the crux of it. We can discuss. I will let the video continue playing. It's about halfway through, so that we can also have conversations around the ideas if that works.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kwasi. Thank you, Igo. And I also like that the discussion continues with the video in the background. It's quite inspiring to see the presentation of the works and the whole context, let's say, on display while we discuss. Hopefully, it's inspiring as well for ourselves and for our guests. I want to, of course, remind anyone who is currently in the Zoom that they're more than welcome to reach out for questions. While we wait for that, maybe I can start with a few questions that I wrote down on my own while I was listening to both of you talk. And I wrote a few questions for Igo as well, but since we have these beautiful images running in the background, I think I can start with a few questions that I have for Kwasi. The first question that I have that I wrote down is it's a bit more in general about the working of all the work that we don't see when we go to an exhibition, but that is intrinsic in putting together such a large scale exhibition. Because of course Bonaventure is mainly based in Berlin, you are based in Ghana, and I wanted to try to understand how working in Bamako, because you mentioned the bigger team working behind the scenes on the ground. I wanted to ask a bit how organizationally and also in terms of inspiration for your curatorial concept and development of the concept, how this relation works, how the relationship with Bamako was established and was kept and was fed throughout the process.
Right. Yeah. So for me, I was asked to join the team, I think 9 months before the opening of the show. So there was no time. And also, given the political unrest in Mali around that time, the dissolution of governments, reconstitution of a new, governments and so forth, there were so many challenges, financial, logistical. So we say that it's a miracle that edition happened. A lot of the work between us curators was done remotely. So it involved a lot of Skype meetings. This was before Zoom became dominant in our lives. So Skype was the major means. WhatsApp communications, a lot of planning and production had to be done remotely, and at the same time, I think we were also working with only half of the budget, for a very long time, and Igo can give more details about this, but it seemed like a cascade of impossibilities. And that's also part of organizing such large-scale exhibitions in our part of the world, even though the crisis with large-scale exhibitions is not exclusive to Africa. It's a global, phenomenon, but particularly this was, it had its unique circumstances which, just raise hurdle upon hurdle. But every time our affirmative posture was about surmounting these challenges. So Bonaventure, I will have to credit a lot, was very forceful, creative, and we all believed in the vision and made it happen. So for me, it was, and I would say that till date, it is one of two of my most meaningful exhibition projects that I've done so far. The other one was done in Ghana as 2017, or that you just saw, that it was also another large-scale show, which was very gratifying. So I don't know if that helps you, but
Sure. It's maybe following up on that. I actually wanted to go more into some questions that I had, which related more to the medium of photography, but maybe I can follow up, because I think it's also striking and something that doesn't happen that often, to have the possibility of following a biennial as a curator, or as a from the curatorial side for multiple editions. And I know your role in the 13th was not in the curatorial team, but still you were able, I suppose, to follow what was happening. And And yeah, maybe you can give us a sense of what it means to be able to carry on a legacy, let's say, over multiple biennials from your own position, which is of course different than Igo's as in a directorial position. And yeah, both what as always, a question implies both what the positive but also what the challenges are of continuing a project over multiple editions of a biennial.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this earlier, how impactful it can be when you get to run more than one edition of a large-scale exhibition, so that by carrying this exhibition as a medium or as a vehicle that carries a particular vision, I think that it is always helpful if you have more than one edition to be able to deal with with your own claims, your premises, but also to come to terms with the complications, and the counter perspectives to it. So for me, I was happy for Bonaventure to be able to carry who had at least 4 years within which to deal with these ideas. But the Bamako Rencontres also I think it's in a transition, if you like. It's been in a transitional phase since the 25th anniversary edition. I think that there are still deep structural institutional issues that plague it, clearly. It is easily discernible when you are there. It doesn't mean that it makes it any less of a biennial. It just means that it makes it has its unique challenges. For example, with our own edition, there were just for us, the legacy of the biennial is also important. So how do you, what is it? The more you're deepening it, the more you're questioning it, you also have to understand the politics of this kind of exhibition. So it's dealing with ministries of culture, it's dealing with governments, it's dealing with private donors and corporate sponsors who all have expectations, of what they want back, and so there are compromises to be made, right? And so yeah, I think it for me, it gave me a lot of material to kind of to process where the large scale exhibition format is in the 21st century, and then kind of contextualize it as well, with let's say Documenta 14, the issues that emerged, and so on and so forth. So those are a few of the things that stayed with me that I am still kind of processing.
Let me bring you as well into this, because
Yeah.
as the person in charge, let's say, of selecting the curators and of making sure that the biennial is run smoothly, I guess. On the one hand, I wanted to ask you what was the reasoning behind re-inviting the same curator for 2 editions, but also if you can walk us through some of these structural elements that Kwasi mentioned now, whatever you feel comfortable, of course, talking about.
Hello, it was me to talk now?
Yes, if you can give
So,
us your
I
perspective.
didn't get the beginning of the question. I thought you
Okay,
was
there were two halves of the question. The first half was what led you to the decision of maintaining the same curatorial leadership, let's say, for 2 editions in a row. And the other is if you can expand a bit on what Kwasi was saying about the restructuring of the biennial and how this is going about. I mean, you mentioned already the relationship with France, but I think there are other elements that come into this.
Yeah, like Kwasi said, I think we're still in transition, because one of the most difficult things in this biennale is to make it institutionalize it, because every 2 years, sometimes we ask ourselves, it will happen? And I think this is a very stupid question to ask ourselves if it's happened. Because me, for example, I'm very nervous when I'm traveling, people asking, oh, the Biennale will happen? So yeah, why you ask me that? Even in my side, if I'm doubting, but I just say, yes, of course it will happen. So we are fighting with the government to make it more established events, so we don't need to fight every 2 years to make it happen. So it's always difficulty, like people were saying, that the situation of Mali, about the crisis, about blah, 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 people don't, unfortunately, consider art and culture as a big role in our society, One thing is important, because also to make a biennale without the state could be complicated in the country like Mali. So if you know that the government could afford the half of the budget, that's the first thing to research with the other part and the rest, But in our 12th edition, they cut a lot the budget because of the war in North, So we have to be imagination to try to, so that's always complicated. I know even in many biennale, even in Senegal, it's always complicated to how to deal with the state. And also, most of the time before me, it was mostly the people who are working for the state. There was a functionary. So after I opened that, it was the first time the government decided to work with the private, because I'm come from the private myself. And Sheikh Jallo also is come from by himself. So that's a new way that we want to take people from not the government, because we are more skilled. We travel, we're part of IBA, we know when things organize. For example, the one of the worst thing, there is not the office for the Biennale who work full-time 2 years to establish, Even right now, we don't know, it will be next year, nothing happened. But sorry, I don't like to talk about the Malian cuisine himself, because it's not, even if you are transparent, I don't like to blame ourselves, I think the most important thing, for example, back to your first step of your question about the curatorial team, most of the time, we make a short list of curator. When I was becoming director, we make a short list of curator and we tell them to make a proposal. And we have a jury and we select that. So that was the idea for when we elect Bonaventure. The idea also, we are starting to work with Bonaventure because, like I tell you, when the Biennale finish, we don't know what's happened the next. So when I was finished mine, before the new team, I was starting to work with Bonaventure. I said, please try to imagine the term, because those people will choose always late. So try to work yourself to make a kind of continuation. And that was a good, because when Sheikh Jallo came, he was already have an idea of the next theme that they chose. So yes, we have very difficult problem of structure until right now. We try to advise the minister as we can, because we are very all concerned about this event. It's the only big event for photography on the continent, and also is it's the only international level of Mali event. We have some festival of music in Ségou, of course, but you know, so yes.
Let me stop you there, actually, because that links very well to another question that I thought about while you were presenting, when you were introducing the Rencontres, which is, you mentioned it's one of a multiplicity of festivals that are happening, biennials and festivals that are happening in Western Africa, in the region of Western Africa. And I remember us talking about this also in other occasions in IBA. And I want to try to understand how much each of these is a completely independent entity, or at least to what extent there is some sort of discussion and network taking place between these. And I promise this is the last institutional questions that I ask. I will go more into the conceptual elements and framework of the biennial with the next one.
No, Christian, it's okay, because Biennale also is very institutional, so don't worry about the institutional process. I think the most of them, for example, the FESPACO is very Pan-African festival events, supported by the state of the Burkina Faso, like I was telling, and it was idea come with different African, but based in Burkina Faso. For the Senegal also, it was the Dakar was decided by the government of Senegal. So, you know, that's the reason they take more, because it's our project, you know. Dakar was in the beginning about also writing and art, but art take the lead very in the first or two edition. So in Massa also in Côte d'Ivoire, it was from the States. The Mali, that was the problem. It become not the idea, not come directly by Mali government. It come, like I say, by French and some Malian. So that's the reason it become a bit complicated when we compare to other one. Also, the budget are not the same, those organizations, but we always compete between us, and in the good way, you know. So there was an idea to make a network between them, because, for example, when I was director, of course, I attend Burkina Faso, and I was in discussion with them. Dakar, of course, you know, even the last Dakar, there was a team of the Biennale of Bamako come to make a conference, but there are no structure, official network between them. It's personally people. So I think it's good that we plan that to be more collaboration between us, even if it's not the same focus. But for example, if, you know, most of the Biennale are very diverse, we can bring some cinema from Burkina Faso, we can bring some music from Côte d'Ivoire, you know, and, you know.
Well, that would be, yeah, it would be great to see this network emerge. Maybe in the future, hopefully so. Let me jump straight back into a more conceptual question that I had about the 12th edition. And maybe I can jump back to ask Kwasi directly a question. And in line with the multiplicity of that was driving the show, my question will also be multiple. So on the one hand, I was wondering if the quote unquote flatness of photography that you were trying to put into question can also become somehow an advantage as well, because it is a medium that we're all extremely familiar with. It's very pervasive. If you think of social media, if you think of any sort of communication that we use, photography has definitely been very much present and very much it's a medium that we're all comfortable with somehow. No? So I think we accept it as a flat, steady image, let's say. Of course, I do know that within the contemporary arts, the medium has expanded a lot and has multiplied and has diversified its position. But I think the flatness that you were mentioning can also be not just a departure point, but also really an advantage that the medium presents to, especially in dialogue with the wider public, maybe those that are less familiar with contemporary art practices and so on. So maybe a thought about that. And the other question, still related to the 12th edition, is in the subtitles. There were 4 words. There were 4 keywords.
No, wait. Please, my question, I will not remember the questions.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So let's say, so I'll take it one at a time. But with what you raise, you are correct, because our strategy is to not to disavow, this reality, but to affirm it, so that we go through it to discover immanent possibilities out of it. So that's where it is for us. And so it's in fact we relied on the pictorial format in many instances in order to stage the works, but because we want to, like you rightly said, in photographic practices today, the erstwhile ideas about it being merely documentary or indexical, or just we were going beyond these ideas, and there were artists like Jihan El Tahri and co, who were already kind of exploring various technologies that complicate these kinds of imaging strategies. And so yes, it was an advantage in some instances, but it can also be a disadvantage if it is overemphasized, because if a thing is flat, it is two-dimensional, you see. But for us, the stream of consciousness, particularly with the 12th edition, was that how do you immerse the medium, the practice, the concept in a kind of network or micrological sequence of actions, activities, which kind of impact it enough to transform it. So those were also the questions, because if you look at the practice of photography, if you take it too far in the zone of it being representational or pictorial or flat, what you're doing is you're also silently repressing, all of the various activities that happen before the event of the picture. Okay, so the camera, for example, is a very complex tool and technology that registers images in its own way, that translates it for us, and then it goes through various other processes before we get the end product. So we didn't want to risk, that historical risk recreating that historical problem of always privileging what is on the surface of the material in terms of photography.
I understand, yes. Before I go to my other question, I wanted to, of course, remind anyone that is in the room right now to come forward if you have any questions. We're more than welcome to have anyone intervene. While I wait for that, I can go on with my other half question, which somehow relates to this. At least it does in my mind. I hope it does to you as well. Which is in describing the conceptual framework and of the biennial, you reminded us of the subtitles that you had on multiplicity, diversity, becoming. You left out heritage in your explanation. How does heritage, how does history and so on come into this picture?
Yes, that's a very keen observation. So it wasn't intentional, but I would say that, you know, for me, and also from my understanding of how the curatorial team were, you know, dealing with these ideas of difference and multiplicity and how it relates to cultural identity and more. It reminded me of a mid-century position. You know, Kwame Nkrumah, who was a very important Pan-Africanist, he and the first president of Ghana. For him, the conception of heritage and the African identity was not as a nostalgic, you know, rigid thing that would then be interpreted in purist or ethnocentric or, you know, such terms. For him, the notion of becoming was also applicable to this this condition of heritage. And so if you are positing ideas of you know, difference, of multiplicity, of equality, and you have to be consistent when you come to notions like heritage, because then, you know, how do these ideas also funnel through to impact it? And for me, Nkrumah gives us a very important formula for, you know, what he conceived of as the African personality, being that, you know, one must come to terms, one who is from the African world has to come to terms with a few things in order to create or recreate their own being, which is the ancient African history, the Islamic invasion, and the Euro-Christian invasion of the continent, as well as, you know, the colonial conditions and so forth. Through all of these traumatic events, how do you forge or create this Africanness, you know, that is a post-colonial emancipated subject? And so that is the lens through which I read, you know, this position of the biennial in terms of heritage. And so it is consistent with how it is being applied in photography, as well as in identitarian and cultural.
Yeah, I understand that. It makes sense. Okay, if there are no questions from the audience, maybe what I would like to suggest is, Igo, you had shared a short presentation video of the Biennial.
La 12e édition de la Biennale africaine de la photographie ouvre ses portes en présence du président malien Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta.
Les rencontres de Bamako offrent l'opportunité historique de faire de l'art en général et l'art photographique singulièrement un puissant antidote à l'embrigadement et aux dérives idéologiques, doublé d'un formidable véhicule de promotion de la diversité culturelle et de la tolérance et du vivre ensemble.
Une volonté d'ouverture culturelle et d'accès des sites d'exposition jusque dans les cours des maisons des Bamakois.
Et la culture aussi, c'est un contenu universel. Donc garder ces choses-là, c'est vraiment très très important. Même pas pour moi seul, pour les générations futures. Il faut qu'on comprenne ça maintenant. Les photos, ça parle. Les photos, c'est l'art. Les photos, c'est tout, quoi.
La photographie s'expose également dans la rue, à la vue et au su des passants. De nombreux lieux de culture accueillent les clichés des artistes qui savent tirer parti de l'environnement mis à leur disposition.
L'idée, c'était ici d'utiliser l'espace. Donc on a par exemple ce coin dans lequel il y a une image c'est une image de grotte en fait au Bas-Congo. C'est un endroit assez fort. Eh bien, l'idée c'était d'utiliser ce coin pour pouvoir avoir un pool, pour pouvoir attirer en fait l'audience plutôt dans un rapport tactile en fait avec les images.
Django Cissé est le roi de la carte postale qui propulse l'imagerie du Mali à travers le monde.
Les élèves m'ont demandé de leur faire des photos, pas des photos individuelles, mais des photos de groupe. Et comme ça, si la photo n'est pas, je suis sûr que quelqu'un va quand même accepter de payer. J'ai donné les pellicules à Malik Sidibé qui les développait et les tirait pour moi. Malik me donnait la photo à 50 francs et moi je les vendais à 100 francs. Les samedis soirs, je faisais des reportages de surprise parties et je rentrais avec un peu d'argent et voilà, comme ça, la photo est partie.
Dans le palmarès des capitales africaines des arts, Conakry prépare son événement culturel majeur en 2020.
L'Office national de la photo et de la cinématographie en Guinée a bien voulu ressortir ces photos pour montrer qu'en Guinée, il y avait une vie, il y avait vraiment des choses exceptionnelles au tout début de l'indépendance guinéenne. Ce qui nous permet de faire un peu le lien, parce qu'à Conakry, en avril dernier, le Mali était pays invité d'honneur. La thématique des 72 heures du livre, c'était livre et images. Le Mali est venu avec des photographes, des réalisateurs de cinéma, des peintres. On a fait honneur au Mali et le Mali fait vraiment la place à la Guinée dans le cadre de cette biennale.
Une majorité grandissante avec un passage de relais dans l'organisation de la biennale.
La coopération française s'inscrit désormais comme partenaire de la biennale et non plus, comme c'était le cas jusqu'à présent, comme coproducteur de la manifestation. Et je suis très heureux de voir que ce passage de témoin est totalement assumé et réussi.
C'est une volonté mutuelle et je me dis après 25 ans, c'est pas trop tôt, hein? C'est ce qu'on aurait pu dire parce que mais comme c'était une initiative au début de certains opérateurs français et maliens, c'est normal que pendant longtemps il a pu avoir cette coproduction, mais je pense qu'il arrive à un moment où on se dit ouais, assumons-nous. Et je veux dire, ça a coïncidé aussi avec toute la production qui a été faite sur le Mali, c'est qui est vraiment un challenge exceptionnel. Quand je dis la production, c'est les photos, les cadres, c'est la scénographie, tout ça a été, c'est du Made in Mali, du Made Africa.
Les expositions seront accessibles jusqu'au 31 janvier 2020.
There is one question that we have in the chat and one raised hand, so the video was stimulating enough for our audience to engage. I'd go with the raised hand first and read you the question in the chat afterwards. So if Kabena Kazangati wants to intervene, please feel free to open your mic and your camera so we can see you, or just your mic. Hello?
Hello, good morning.
Yeah. Good morning.
Thank you so much for this presentation, and I'm happy being here. I have a question that I found particularly interesting for the two previous edition, where I was in the 19th edition, but the third one, the 13th, I just went to visit, but I found all the implications so interesting, but the most interesting for me was the scenography. Then I was trying to ask Kwasi and Igo about how do they come to decide to this policy of scenography, the decisions, actually what I mean, how that was so important for the two previous Biennale, and what is the policy? How those decisions have been made for the two previous Biennale? Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Yes. Well, I can speak more confidently about the 12th edition because for us in the ideas, in our desire to kind of look at this broader horizon of the practice of photography, we were in sync with the scenographer at the time, Sheikh Jallo, who is an architect, a sculptor, and so we were already on the same page. So when you have this interest and you are making your selections based on such trans-photographic practices, it is also necessary to evolve or to create display forms, display strategies that will enhance, complement, or complicate or to drive home the arguments that you are trying to raise. So for us, Sheikh Jallo was already in this frame of mind as well. So his designs, him and his team, it was more about creating, going beyond just mounting pictorial works on walls or on flat surfaces, but how do you create spaces? How do you create objects? How do you objectify an image? And vice versa. So it was a very experimental process. You'll see that there are some designs that are staging some of the printed matter on what look like they are open, like entrances, okay, or like on doors. So when you mount it like that, then the space of exhibition is itself, like you can go through the display form itself, but then it can also be an optical experience and so forth. So he was very playful, and for us that suited our interests. And I was talking to Sheikh Widrago, who worked on, who was also part of the team of scenographers who worked on the 13th edition, and they were the earthy vibe of the scenography, they say, was inspired by I think it's red soil or red ochre or something like that. And so this influences the hues that they use to intervene in the spaces, and how and what the works are shown on and in. So for our edition, I think we encouraged the scenography to also respond to these experimental directions.
Thank you for the answer. And there's a further question from René Ojija. And their question was if you can talk about the artist selection process and how the work is curated. Are there some specific sites, or are there some site-specific based on the artist's preference? Like, are you working specifically with specific artists on sites that they might have a preference on and so on? I think that's the That's the question.
Yeah, so it was a combination of approaches. So during the pre-production phase of the biennial, the curatorial team made 2 visits to Bamako. One of them was to sit and to actually make the artist selection, but we go through the open call process, which yields hundreds of applications. And there's also, I think, for us, each curator had 3 artists that they could, you know, just outside of the open call system to invite. Okay, so based on our team and the direction. And so also with the limitation of the budget, we were encouraging the restaging of existing works, so that you know, so for artists who had existing work that they thought you know, fit well with the theme, either to challenge it or to agree or not. The point was they could send us those works so that we stage as they are. A few artists were able to kind of, you know, tweak or to realize variations of existing projects. Yeah, so, and then the special projects were also kind of exhibitions that existed already, but which were brought to Mali to kind of you know, which were recontextualized, you know, based on how they were displayed in Mali, which spaces were available, you know, what conditions and so forth. So yes, so the selection process was based on the open call and the invitation process, and then with the selection of the sites, because Astrid Lepoutier was based in Mali at the time, so she had direct hands-on knowledge about a lot of the sites. Bonaventure was visiting a lot. Igo and co, who are on the ground, were also helpful. So by the time those of us like Aziza and myself, you know, joined in Mali, we had options on the table for the sites. So when we were there, we visited after the selection of the artists. No, prior to the selection of the artists, we knew the sites that were available. So as we were after we selected the artists, we were able to distribute them according to the chapters, according to the spacing. And some works, yes, were created based on, you know, on the ground, although not many. So like you could call them site-specific projects, but because of the budgetary limitations, it was largely restaging works.
Yeah, I really wanted to thank you for your time and for your presentation. It was yeah, it was great to hear about how it all came together and to see some of the images. I think it was great for not just for ourselves, but I hope also for our members across the world that either follow today or will have a chance of seeing the presentation in the following days and months. And yeah, I think we've talked now for almost an hour and a half, so I think it's time to give you all the freedom to continue the rest of the day as you see fit. Again, thank you very much, Kwasi. Thank you very much, Igo, for your time and for your presentation today. And if you want to add something, of course, feel free. Otherwise, I want to thank everyone, and I also want to thank very much, as always, Jennifer, who is working behind the scenes to make all of this happen smoothly.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Jennifer, Christian, Igo, and everybody who joined.